Hey, welcome to episode 111 of the Evolving Man podcast. Today I'm delighted to be speaking to Chris Braitch. Chris is a father of three, first and foremost. He is also a one-to-one and organizational coach, speaker, and founding director of the not-for-profit Seen and Heard. Seen and Heard supports the emotional well-being of ex-pupils and of boarding and independent day schools and their families. Chris has found his calling supporting others on their journey to healing and joy, utilizing his diverse life experiences and professional skills learned over a 20-year career in sales, marketing, and management at some of the world's largest food companies. Welcome, Chris.
Oh, thank you very much, Piers. Yeah, it's an absolute joy to be here. Having
Yeah,
watched so many of these, to be on the other side of it is mind blowing.
yeah. I'm sure watching it later on when it goes live, it will kind of be okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, surreal moment. I think. Yeah, I've probably seen 90% of the 111 that have been done,
Wow.
and some of them were pivotal in my learning, my develop, my healing journey. Thinking particularly back to some of the early ones. Nick Duffel, boarding school syndrome, Rod Boothroyd, archetypal work, loads more. But yeah, they were landmark in my recovery and my growth. So I just want to thank you for doing that,
Mm.
for all the work you've done, all those people who've been on there, because I've genuinely found it really inspirational. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I had received an email from someone today just saying thank you and that they're a training counselor sending people to listen to them. So thank you. Yeah. So, you know, I'd love to begin. Obviously, we met through working together, doing one-to-one work about 2.5 years ago. Um, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey to where you've got to now, taking on this, director of this not-for-profit Seen and Heard. What's been some of your journey? What got you there? Got you here?
Yeah, thanks, Piers. I think the journey to kind of doing what I'm doing now has really been, it's like I'm 44 now. It's been like a 44-year journey. I always say to people, I've been training my whole life for this. All of the difficulties in my life, all of the trauma, all of the attempts at healing, all the coping stuff that I've had to go through. But the last sort of 3 years, really, since I had a breakdown, they've been like kind of personal development on speed, on light years. It's just been crazy, throwing myself into it. And I think, there's elements of my addiction in there, but moving my addictions from one thing to another. But it's within that I found my purpose. I've really found my purpose, and supporting people, reaching back to do whatever I can to support others is what I will spend the rest of my life doing now. Um, but the first half, if you like, is like a kind of round of golf, the front nine and the back nine. If I'm blessed enough to have another 40 odd years or something, then the first half was kind of learning, um, and going through the fire, if you like. And then I had a period with you healing in the ashes of that fire, kind of loads of one-to-one work, and so a load of other things we might get onto as far as my healing journey. But yeah, and then it feels now like I'm coming out of that ashes period, and actually I found my purpose. I'm very clear on that now, and yeah, it's been great. It's been an awesome journey, and I think like all good stories, it starts at the beginning, the beginning of your life, or this life anyway. Um, but yeah, it's been great.
Thank you, Chris. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your life. You went to boarding school age 6.
Yeah.
Before that, how were things?
Yeah, I think it was a difficult start, if you like. So I don't come from like a boarding school family. My mum was working class. She came from Blackburn, up in Lancashire. She was a landlord's daughter, if you like. Grew up in a really tough pub in a tough neighbourhood, and was very badly, you know, traumatized and treated as a child. A lot of abuse, a lot of alcohol in the family, and that sort of stuff. So she'd had a tough life, and So she moved down south and became an English teacher, English and PE, which always end up being my favourite subjects. So that's the way it goes. But yeah, dad's middle class guy from London, parents engineer and a English teacher. And he grew up, he had a pretty good upbringing. So mum had a pretty tough upbringing, dad not so much. But I know that, my granddad, dad's dad, he was captured in World War II, injured and captured and kept in a POW camp. And I know that he then needed very much structure, engineering, discipline after that kind of experience. And I think that rubbed off on dad. And what that meant for my parents is that, mum's childhood meant she didn't want kids. I've done a lot of healing work with my dad over the last few years, and he's been so brave, and I love him so much for sharing with me the honesty. He said, yeah, mum wasn't up for it. I kind of talked her into it, and thank God, because otherwise my life, I wouldn't be here. But that meant that the struggles she was having, depression, anxiety, drinking, by the time I came along and added, to that, she had, really bad postnatal depression and things, and then just struggled to be around. She left a couple of times before they finally divorced when I was 5. So, I don't remember a lot of mum in those early days. I know she was around at times, other times she wasn't. And my dad's a good man, but he was running a business at the time, and by his own ambition, he's a bit of a workaholic. And so he was doing that, and mum was sort of, here, there, and everywhere. And so I was kind of raised by a village of strangers, and it takes a village to raise a child, but ideally you want to know a few of them. So for me, it was a lot of like dad's work colleagues, family, friends, babysitters, that sort of stuff. So that was kind of like my early years. And then around 5, mum and dad divorced. Mum was off the grid for a while. I don't remember. I think I lived with dad for a year. I went to a local school, which I loved, just one up the road. He'd pick me up, after school every night. And apart from getting into trouble for one of my best friends was getting bullied, I went home and said to dad, what shall I do? Because my friend's getting bullied. He said, oh, you've got to go back in and punch him in the nose as hard as you can. So unfortunately, I did that. And that meant a change of schools around about that time. So I had a couple of schools in that first year. But I learned a lesson then. I've never hit anyone since. It wasn't the right way to go. But apart from that, it was, I was an only child. So I'm an only child. But so there wasn't a lot to do, because parents were very absent. So I just made my own fun, very lost in my head a lot, read a lot of books, a lot of kind of storybooks and cartoons and TV and nature. So, that's how I kind of grew up. But I think the divorce was messy. Like at 5, that was really, really messy. And both parents went on to meet a new person straight away. And actually, that's kind of the segue to the next bit, if you like, because my mum went to a conference, and the speaker there was like a direct marketing guru kind of guy, and they got on really well, fell in love, all the rest of it. But he was ex-boarding school guy, so he went 7 to 18 in sort of Sussex area as a boarder. So I think mum looked at him up on the stage, big name, dressed beautifully, spoke beautifully, very articulate, funny man. And she went, yeah, I want that for my son, coming from Blackburn, that probably never met anyone from a boarding school. And she, she said to dad, I don't want anything in the divorce, just pay Chris's school fees, because I think, my belief is dad was working all the time and had this new lady. Mum was not well all her life and struggled, and her and John were then sort of, their demons played well together, if you like, a lot of drinking, a lot of late nights, a lot of traveling, living the high life. So she wanted to go off and do that, and felt that probably I wouldn't be safe or well looked after in that environment. Probably the things Dad had going on, maybe I wouldn't have been well suited there. So I believe it was an act of love to kind of give me that kind of experience that she could see my stepdad had, like to become the big shot, to become the kind of like confidence or charismatic guy he was. So yeah, that was the kind of chapter one, if you like.
Mm. Wow. Wow, that must have been pretty intense. Um, your mother being there and then not being there and then divorcing. Um, and then meeting this charismatic guy. And, I'd love you to share a little bit about, 6 going off to boarding school. How was that for you, that first period, that prep school?
Yeah. And here's the bit where, you see my eyes darting around, and it's because I've tried to write my story
Mm.
and put it on the wall here in my office because I don't remember, I've got huge periods of kind of dissociation and black holes in the memory, if you like. And I went just about 7, so it was just after my 7th birthday that September. Um, and yeah, I don't, a lot of people remember everything about it. They remember, oh, I remember being dropped off. I remember carrying my trunk in. I remember getting my bed and did it. I've got like, they're not so much memories as they are almost like smells or tastes.
Mm.
That they're not really details. I remember a few things, but I a lot of people had that heartbreaking abandonment. That day they knew they'd been left. I don't have that so much, and it's because I didn't have anything much to leave. I didn't have like a home with the sister, the brother, the pets, the bedroom, all that sort of stuff. I was kind of, I was a 2 household kid anyway. We were always bouncing around quite a lot. Um, and so for me, it was like great adventure. Yeah. And until I got there, and that's the thing. I remember getting my trunk, my tuck box ready, get my trunk ready, shopping in the outfitters, wow, this all looks very smart. And there's a picture of me kind of going off on my first day, like, wait, let's do it. And then, yeah, the door closes behind you. And this place was it was cold. There wasn't enough food. The meals were terrible. And we didn't have like a lot of tuck and stuff like that to sort of fill up with. And I just remember the first dormitory. I got given the bed by the door, this huge, like old creaky door in a dorm full of, I don't know, maybe 15 kids, 20 kids, something like that. And I just remember not sleeping for 4 years because, like, although we moved dorms, for some reason, I just became this really light sleeper. People would knock your bed as they went to the loo in the night. You'd hear matron walking up and down the halls. There wasn't a way to sleep very easily. Plus, you were crying, other kids were crying, people were mucking around, sort of trying to blow off a bit of steam and stuff like that. So yeah, I just remember like sleep deprivation. That kind of stayed with me. I was an awful sleeper until 3 years ago, 3 years ago. Um, but there were some good things there. I just like fell in love with sport of all kinds. That's utterly saved me. And it was with the sport coaches and things that I found sort of parents, if you like, at most of the schools I went through. It was the coaches and stuff like that. But it was beautiful as well. There's enormous oak trees it was a nice place, but it wasn't a top tier school. None of the schools I went to, I mean, one went out of business a couple of years after I left it. The other two were, we're talking bottom of the pay scale here. They weren't like all the facilities and all that stuff. But yeah, I think I was scared a lot. I just remember the first night, one of the other kids said, if you're not careful, one of the older kids will use a compass and carve the house name into your arm and then wash it off with aftershave to mark you for the house. Now, this never happened. I never saw anyone with this, but because he told me and he had an older brother, I just believed it. I was 7 years old. So after that, I thought it was like the sword of Damocles hanging over your head. You're waiting for it to drop all the time. And then I think maybe second term, I got caught talking after lights out and marched down to the headmaster's study, and three of us lined up, and we were beaten, with a green flash trainer. But it was the pain was bad, but the thing I hated was it was the wait outside the office. Oh, it was awful. It was like the longest wait in the world. And then going in, and then the humiliation of sort of being bent over a desk and hit by this like pipe smoking, old duffer. It was just, a couple of those things in the first year, and after that, Hypervigilance was my middle name. You know what I mean? So yeah, yeah, and then the holidays stuff. It was usually like day camp, sport camps, day camps, activity things, or I'd just go out and ride my bike, knock around on my own. But the challenge with a lot of boarding school stuff is you don't know anyone where you live.
Mm, mm,
Like you haven't got friends where you live necessarily. So I just remember all through my childhood, I had very few friends where I lived until my teens. Um, but yeah, yeah, it wasn't a great time. So I haven't got a huge amount of memories from that time. Some of the holidays, family holidays and stuff are there. Um, but yeah, it wasn't an ideal start, I don't think. No.
mm. So I'm hearing kind of fear, hypervigilance. And it sounds like neglect, the food being really poor, not enough. And then, yeah, this sword of Damocles over you when that kid said that thing about the compass, and I think I had a similar thing. You hear the tales in those first few weeks. That's how I think a lot of us learned is you didn't need to do it yourself. You were told this is what happened before, and this will happen is what will happen to you if you do that, if you run away, if you, tell anyone what's been happening.
Mm.
So yeah, I can resonate with that sort of Damocles.
It's
So
the culture thing, isn't it? That
yeah.
when you go to, whether it's a new organization, a new institution, you get there and they stamp the culture on you.
Mm, mm,
Like,
mm,
you hope to absorb the culture and look around. These are the way we do things. But I think with the boarding schools, how they were, I can't say if that's how they are now, but they didn't let you absorb it. They just stamped it into you on like day one. Like I can't have this kid off the rails for even a minute. So let's just get him into the mold quickly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard some schools, it's been a week. You have a week to learn where everything is, learn the names of all the houses, and then you get tested. After a week, if you don't know the answers, then you get beaten. Then that's when the punishment comes in. But you have a 1 week window. And I think I remember that to some degree with our school is we had that window of they were nice for the first week, and then it's like, okay, enough now.
Mm.
We're not taking that. No, you can't do that. So yeah. So then, you leave that boarding school, go on to your second prep school. What age were you? And what was that like?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I was 10 to 13. I went to my next one. So I was 7 to 10 at one, 10 to 13 at the next one. And there's still no like official record of why I moved.
Mm,
But my mum was in so many ways just absolutely like a brilliant life force. She was a mad kind of hippie, um, uh, like she was full of beans, very, very like, or she wasn't. Do you know what I mean? She was one of those people with that kind of, I guess in the old days they call it manic depression, that kind of like, or bipolar or whatever, just up and down and up and down. She was either on queen of the world and doing everything, or in bed, or medicating somewhere in between. So yeah, I don't know why I went, but I've got a feeling she didn't like the austere environment of that first school, and I just remember a lot of her letters. My mum couldn't really say verbally what, I love you, um uh you know I value what you say, and she didn't have those words. From her background, she wouldn't have had all that. But her letters were beautiful. You
Mm.
know, she could say it when she wrote it, and she would send comics and little sweets and things like that. But I think she got the sense that I wasn't happy, and I think when news got back to her, you know, being beaten and stuff like that, she was like, "No, that's not okay." So the next school was much more kind of benign experience, if you like. They didn't beat kids there. I was around about that time when they should have stopped anyway, where the law changed in the 80s.
Mm.
But you know, the private schools clung on to that for like another decade afterwards.
Mm.
Um, and I went through that period. So yeah, the second school was definitely better. You know, what I remember about that was just the sports stuff was amazing. By that point, I was playing sort of 5 sports for the school and a couple of sports at county level. Um, and yeah, my I had a coach there, a rugby coach, ex-army guy, who was he was like my dad, you know, at school. Lovely man, lived with his wife on the grounds, and they would take us to all the matches. And they were mum and dad basically when you were at school. They were good people. Um, you know, the difficult stuff there. There was it was a warmer place. There was enough food. The dormitories weren't great, but you weren't under constant threat, sort of thing. The difficult stuff was the bullying, and I can't say whether that's different in a state school or boarding school or whatever. The difference in boarding schools, you just can't get away.
Yeah, it's 24/7.
Just 24/7. Yeah, there's no. You're supposed to be able to go out and fight bears and then go back to your cave and roll the rock across, so that your system can process that, you know, shake off the trauma and move on. No, you know, you can't do stuff like that. Probably only sport was the way to shake anything off or get anything out on the rugby pitch or whatever. Um, yeah, so the bullying stuff was brutal there because you, for me at that point, I'd learned to be like a hypervigilant sort of people pleaser. I was like a chameleon. I would just find out what you wanted from me, and I'd just be that. If you want me to like these bands, I'll like those bands. If you want me to wear this t-shirt, I'll wear this t-shirt. Because I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to not be alone. No siblings, you know, all that stuff. So I kind of it's like being in prison, trying to get in a prison gang. You
Mm.
have to like, you know, blood in, blood out. You have to kind of do stuff to get in with these groups within in the schools. And I wanted to be in with like the cool kids, like you know, people do, because the cool kids didn't get bullied much, and they seemed to have a run of the place. So, um, you know, I ended up hanging out with them for probably a year, best part of a year. But in that period, I changed so much. Like I ended up being a bully because they were doing the bullying. And it seemed to be you had a choice. You were like, you were the hunter or you were the hunted. Or
Mhm.
you just tried to sort of blend into the background, like complete obscurity, become wallpaper. Um, and that didn't really work for me. I was a bit too loud and you know, a bit too energetic. So, but there was, you know, big experience there with that gang of people. I realized after a while that this was not good. It wasn't who I was, and tried to separate off to have some new friends. And that, you know, the ringleader of that little group, after that, basically spread the rumor around school that I was gay. And you know, back then in the sort of early 90s, it was like social death.
Mhm.
You know, it at that point everybody would just you were ostracized effectively. And I remember that being really tough, losing all my friends in one go because of one rumor. And I think my offense that led to that was that one of my new friends was unhappy. He wanted to go home at a weekend and he couldn't. I put my hand on his shoulder and someone saw, and I was gay, and that was it. And
Mhm.
yeah, it took, I don't know, a year, 6 to 9 months, a year maybe after that to kind of for it all to settle down.
6 to 9 months. That's
It's bonkers.
having some touch. Wow. That's heartbreaking. And have you heard Stephen Fry's account of the very similar thing happening in his book?
No, I haven't. No.
Um, it's in this one here, Moab is my washpot. And he talks about that there's a boy he has cramp coming out of the swimming pool,
Mm.
And Stephen Fry helps him, puts his arm around him, says, "You're right." And the rumor started, "You're gay." And so no one would talk to him. And I think one of the teachers came up to him and said, "What's happened?" Because they could see he was upset. And so Stephen replied, told what happened. And then the master stood up in front of all of the kids and says, "Oh, there's a real hero from today," and called out, "Well done to Stephen Fry for going and helping that guy. Wow, what a great guy." And so totally flipped it around, and
Mm.
the bullying stopped then. But it's like, oh, yeah, it would have been great if there'd been a teacher or an adult in your school who'd seen that and done something about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know this coach that I looked up to and looked after me a lot. His thing was he just give me the keys to the squash court.
Mm, mm,
He was like, sort of don't tell anyone I gave you the keys, and I'd go off and just hit on my own, safe because I was safe in there, and
mm,
I would just hit a squash ball for 2 hours. That was my therapy. But yeah, no, thanks for sharing that story. I think it was difficult to lose. You just feel, and it was this feeling that stayed with me a lot of my life. You just feel the bottom drop out of your stomach.
mm,
Everything goes cold. It's that fight or flight thing coming in. You're like, oh, this is really bad. And I think the culture of the school wasn't terrible. I've had horror stories that being part of Seen and Heard. Um, I've heard the worst stuff. I didn't have the worst stuff at that school, but we were one of the things that really stayed with me. I had to process with you in our sessions together was on the way to a squash tournament, and in the minibus, I'm up the front with my favorite coach and his wife, having a lovely time listening to music. We're on the way there. It's the big national championships. So it's very exciting because we get a couple of nights away. And we're driving through the outskirts of London in the front, and this guy just falls off the pavement, sort of a high pavement, just falls off, and we hit him in the minibus, and the guy he dies. You know, the man dies, and being up the front, I can see it. We worked it through. I could hear it still. I could hear the sound of him hitting the bonnet and that PTSD stuff. But I mean, that's an awful tragedy. No one at fault. But it's what happens next that I think I've got the problem with, which is we were very. It took hours questioned by the police. We were late to our accommodation. Blah blah blah. We just sent to bed. Got up the next day. Played in the tournament. No, the parents were never told. I told my dad as an adult, and he was furious because they should have known. There was no like counselling at school, no, not even going to see the matron, sort of thing. So it just got swept under the rug. I think it was sort of inconvenient truth. Um, so it's things like that. I think it wasn't. It was quite a benign environment, but stuff like that, it stays with you, and I carried that for 30 years until you and I worked it through. But
mm.
yeah, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's that thing of cover up. I think when we interviewed Alex Renton for the documentary, talked about that. And the same in my school, most schools, it's like the teachers who were abusing got references to go on to other schools rather than, and I spoke to the head teacher, Tuan Zopperman, a few years ago, and he says the duty of care is always to the school above the child. If it was the other way around, your parents would have been told. So,
Yeah.
oh, this happened. It's inconvenient. It hurts, and we apologize, but to speak up. And yeah. So you then kind of leave age 13. I
Yeah.
mean, was it your choice to leave boarding school? I mean, what
Yeah.
happened?
Uh, again, tracing it back, sort of conversations with dad and things, in adult life. All through that period, I was at those schools. Home life was messy, really messy. Like mum was clearly, she's always been not well, emotionally, mentally not well, but there was something else going on as well. So they sold the house they lived in. I remember coming home one weekend and we bought a caravan. You now live in a caravan, like, right, okay. But it's like a motorhome thing. So he went from living in a house to living on a campsite. We stayed there for a couple of years. Then we started to move around in that motorhome and live in different places. And they tried to take me off to live in Portugal. And my dad had to, get me back legally. And they just kept moving. They just kept moving. And it was like mum couldn't be comfortable anywhere, didn't feel safe anywhere. She just kept moving. And it was like Bath and then Glastonbury. And she was on a mission. I think she was on a mission to feel better, to heal. She didn't have that words, the structure, or whatever. And at this time as well, Dad had been through a second marriage to a woman who wasn't nice. I was sort of inconvenient when I came home at the weekends to their life together, which was like living the 80s dream, sort of Wall Street, let's make a load of money, get the clothes, go on nice holidays, have the nice car and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, home wasn't, great. It was very sort of up and down. And I think what happened to leave that school, because my final report says I should have gone off to another school in Bath. And then the next thing I remember, conscious memory, if you like, is we're in Devon and I'm at a day school. And yeah, it was just a total change of scene. I was happy because I wasn't boarding anymore. I was coming home to mum and John, my stepdad. But I don't know why. And it became pretty clear. I think I came home maybe the third or fourth week of my first term. Mum was staying in this horrible little rental sort of house on a main road. She'd fallen out with John again. They'd been on and off for years. And, no reply at the door. Look through the letterbox. I see her on the floor, unconscious. Ran across the road to the garage. They found the ambulance, and the police came and battered the door down. And she had a massive seizure, was unconscious. And within a year of that, she was dead from a brain tumor. And yeah, just about got home. I just came home, and then the world just falls out from underneath you again. I think that's always that thing that stayed with me, the anxiety bit. Is every time you get your feet on something, it would just disappear. And my core belief that you and I have worked through, and I've worked through in other stuff, is the world is not safe. And my subconscious did a bloody good job, because it wasn't safe. It was never safe to stay still, to get attached, to feel too comfortable. Yeah, just be ready all the time, because it's going to drop. It's going to drop, and then it drops again. You're like, shit, and it kept going, as you know in my story, it keeps going. So yeah, losing mum, and I, by this point, I was so dissociated. She was dying in another room, and I just played video games and listened to heavy metal. And by this point, I was smoking pretty much 20 a day at 13. And then I got into weed and drinking 13, 14 as mum was getting sick. And yeah, just video games, heavy music, and a constant sort of quest to get booze and weed and fags and stuff like that. And porn, porn addiction, and just anything, like I just grabbing onto stuff. And I think the only wholesome thing I did in that whole period was I used to go down to the church, our local church, at night. I'm never a religious person, really. I wasn't a religious family, and I was too scared to go in. But I would go and kneel in the vestibule and just like pray to whatever. I didn't really know who, but I would go down there and pray and ask for help with my exams or help with mum or whatever. So that's a healthy thing that stayed with me. I still do it every night now. Same prayer as I wrote as a 14-year-old. But
wow, a wise 14-year-old.
Yeah, there was always something. All the years, all the stuff, there was always a little voice. Just get up. Just get up. Just keep going. So yeah, it brings a lot of emotion. That.
Yeah. Thank you. What an incredible story. And I'm aware of time, and I'd love to hear maybe how it affected you as an adult. So you went through these experiences at school,
Mm.
then you came home, you lost your mother, and then you know went to the local school and then on to college. When did you start to realize the impact of your upbringing of, on yourself physically, mentally?
Yeah, thank you. About 16, so I was living with dad by this point at sixth form college. I was really big into weed and drinking, but I had a bad acid trip and experienced complete, I know now to be my first full dissociation, depersonalization sort of experience. Like, my whole self melted away and I split into two or three people and I didn't really ever come back together again. So I thought all that stuff, I thought I'd ruined my mind, I thought that was it. There was no one to help and things like that. So that was the start of things going really quite bad for me. After that, it was panic attacks, a lot of panic attacks, and I'd medicate always with drink. So drinking was my drug of choice after that. I'd scared off drugs by that experience. And then come uni, I ended up in university counselling services at 20 with anxiety and a drink problem. But for 20 years after that, of therapy and counselling, nobody asked much about the early years stuff, much about boarding school. They'd always just go to the big tick, oh, your mum dying, oh, the drinking. And it was all quite short term, you get your 4 or 5 sessions, but you can't get near the stuff. You couldn't get near my wounds with that sort of, it was like dabbing at the surface of a gunshot wound. So yeah, I was unraveling there. I mean, at uni, I had the most amazing group of friends. They were brilliant people, beautiful people. And I started to feel like I had a family living in a house together with them. My dad had remarried at 16 to a wonderful woman, and she had 2 kids. So actually, dad's life from 16 sort of onwards with dad was really good. I started to feel like a family. So actually, although I was crumbling, my mental health was crumbling, I actually started to have these support structures, friends, and my dad's new marriage and her kids, and my stepdad, after mum had died, had married another wonderful woman. So things had actually started to firm up, and I think that kept me alive during that period. But all through my 20s, 30s, anxiety, the physical health stuff started to unravel in my 20s. I got a note up there because I had to remember all the things that went wrong. And it's like, so about 24, I ended up with skin cancer, ulcerative colitis, like autoimmune condition, appendicitis, gout, acid reflux. Just having a look at that. 3 hernias in the space of 2 years. Yeah, so that was within a couple of years. Like the trauma just caught up with me, and my body just went, what? And of course, at the same time, I'm drinking, smoking, coffee, painkillers, greasy, junk food to, medicate. I'd got very fat by this point because I was just, trying to feed the hungry ghosts that lived inside. So yeah, physically, I was a mess really during that period. But I met my wife, my ex-wife, and yeah. Sorry, just give me a second. Just get rid of that little notification. Yeah, I met my ex-wife, and we both like drinking. We both like eating too much, binge watching TV shows. We were kind of off doing that. Yeah, I really fell in love. I mean, she was my first girlfriend because all through school, college, uni, I had terrible self-image. I could put girls up on a pedestal. Like I just got friend zoned basically for like 6 years of my life. I was kind of like the agony uncle for all my friends' relationships and all that sort of stuff. There were no needs of mine kind of able to be put out there and met, with the partner and things. So, but I did get married in my 20s, and yeah, it was really good. you know, for a couple of years, we had a good laugh, basically. We had a great time. She had the family I wanted. I realized now I was quite, looking back, I was quite parasitic in a lot of ways. I would, like, all through my childhood, I would latch onto other people's families. You know, if I went round someone's for dinner and I liked it, you know, I'd stay. I'd ingratiate myself with the parents and and then I was like the house guest. You know, they'd almost invite me around ahead of their own kids. And I found that, you know, with when I met my wife, that she was like working class family, um, all lived in one place, all went round each other's for Sunday lunch, all that sort of stuff. And they're all big drinkers. So I just fit right in. They didn't judge me, took me as I was. And I think I wanted as little to do with posh people as I could. Yeah. So the kind of the physical bit was unraveling. And emotionally, I was just very paranoid, very anxious, you know, all through that period. We were blessed with my first son, my son, Ben, in my early 30s. And we had a blissful sort of first 6 months with Ben. And then he started to go downhill, like missing milestones. We knew something wasn't right. And around, you know, on his first birthday party, he had a massive seizure. And after that, it was, you know, 3 years. He lived another 3 years. He had a very rare genetic condition, and yeah, during that 3 years, he died when he was 4. We also had, my wife got pregnant again with twins. So because it was genetic, we had to go through this testing that could have, you know, we could have lost the twins because of the testing. She's trying to nurse Ben 24/7, and she did an unbelievably wonderful job doing that. But the twins, you know, thankfully were born, you know, they were born very early, and they had to go through a lot of help, you know, in the hospital and stuff like that. But yeah, I just, by this point, I was so able to dissociate and compartmentalize. I was like, right, you know, off we go, work the next day, parent the twins, help as much as I could on the house. And I just kept going, you know, just trying to keep it all together. And I attached really well to my girls. You know, my wife did an amazing job with Ben. They were very close. I was close with the girls, and it's stayed. They were my, I believe they were my sort of blessing for the things that I didn't have, that I'd lost in my life, because they are just everything to me. But in those early years, it was unspeakably hard. Like the decisions we had to make, they were all life and death, year after year, week after week, trying to keep Ben alive, trying to parent the twins, trying to keep work going. At this point, I was falling apart at work, and I was, you know, controlling and bullying and a nightmare to be around, you know. And sadly, then, you know, Ben died, and my ex-wife, like, we just went in different directions. You know, she grieved and went to bed, which was probably the sensible thing to do. I got up the next day and went to work and vowed that the twins would never miss a day of their life. And that was my way of honoring my son. But it set me up. I just put it away in a box, and like I'd done with mum, like I'd done with the early years stuff, just put it in a box and got up and went to work. And of course you do that. We went in different directions, and you know, we divorced, and most of my 30s I was just on my own with the girls, and mum was up the road, and the girls would move between the 2 houses, and we were always very respectful of each other's time with the kids. You know, we parted it was very hurtful for both of us, but not in a nasty way. We didn't try and hurt each other as we parted and things like that. So yeah, that was kind of, it went into a big rebuilding phase after that. Conscious I've been talking for a while, so I'll take a breath because there's
Yeah, blessings. What a painful journey to lose your son, and yeah, I can only imagine what that's like. I can feel that, and yeah, bless you for your courage and getting through it, and yeah. So the kind of the healing side of things. So, you've been through boarding school, then, what happened as an adult, and then, what has been the path for you to healing?
yeah, thank you. We
It
know I
sounds
had,
like it started to age 20 when you went to that counselor that, oh, there's something needs work on.
yeah, I dropped in and out of sort of NHS systems for 20 years. Just I go and get my 5 sessions of CBT and off you go. And it would patch me up for a bit. And because of that sort of dissociative, quite high functioning anxiety type stuff, I could just run rings around anyone they put in front of me with my sort of survival personalities and my guardians in my head and all this sort of stuff. So I never really got anything done. I felt better for talking, and I know that those people along that journey were important. But trying to parent the kids, by this point, my career was, I got made redundant and I had to start my own consultancy business and try and make that work. And I was like, I can't miss a day with the kids. I can't miss a day at work. I can't. And I was just heading for burnout, heading for meltdown. And then 3 years ago, I got COVID at Christmas, and I got it really, really bad. I lost I still haven't got it back, my sense of taste and smell. And that triggered, along with actually at the time I was playing like virtual reality games on a headset. I basically had, a massive flashback kind of PTSD experience, dissociation, depersonalization, derealization experience. And I didn't exist anymore. I sort of lost my physical self. I didn't know where I couldn't get up. And if I did get up, I thought I was going to fall over. I was a total mess. And I don't know how, but I started Googling something or other, nothing to do with boarding school or whatever, but your name came up on a Google search. I don't know how. It might have been, I might have been typing like dissociation or something, and you'd spoken to a guest about it, but it was like, oh, moment. We connected. You met me at my absolute worst, and that began the last 3-year journey. It was working with you, and for me, you were just like me, and you were just a bit further ahead. And the way you are as a man, made me feel like I could trust someone, and you knew what it was like. And I think that's the difference for me, and that's why coaching's worked for me as a sporty person. I like that we're sort of in this together. You're not sat across the desk with a notebook sort of thing. And that was the start of my healing journey, was starting to trust a man again, talk about my feelings, vulnerability. And we've been working together, weekly for 3 years, give or take. And that's been a huge part of the healing journey. But like I said, all those podcasts, every time I'd watch a podcast, I'd go off and explore that topic. And because of the way you practice your coaching, and now the way I practice my coaching, it's the meditation. And then there was yoga, and stretching and looking after my body, and being so dissociated, what I had to do was learn to breathe again and know that I was here, kind of thing. Some days I'd be like this, all right, I'm still here. So that started to feel the foundations. The breath work started to get me sleeping. the sleeping started to get me rebuilding. And it was just like this set of dominoes that started to happen. And every podcast I'd go off and explore the psychology of it, or new breathwork techniques or whatever. And I'm just kind of looking up like some of my notes that kind of some of the things that actually happen. Yeah. So just the universe sent me one of my friends training as a nutritionist. She needed a guinea pig for her course. She was like, yeah, you can have all this nutritional therapy help for free. So I sorted my diet out, massively. No, I quit booze, caffeine, gluten, cigarettes, basically clean the whole, just did it in one go. And that's the gold of my life, is the discipline bit. If I want to do something, it gets done. And yeah, sort of just knocking things down one at a time. But I found that I'd either been sort of drunk or hungover, or like caffeine up to the eyeballs, or painkillers up to the eyeballs for like 20 years. I didn't even know what me was. I was always a sort of spray painted, weird chemical version of me. And that was helpful, because I could feel again. And then doing the work with you, doing the body work, the breathing, I started to experience these huge shifts. And then plucked up the courage to go onto the Mankind Project. Weekend, I started going on their connection groups. Then I went on the weekend, the New Warrior Training Adventure, and that was like, I men were always people you had to either be in competition with, drinking buddies with, or you thought they were a dick and you sort of kept them at arm's length. There was sort of three categories. But I was like, wow, these guys, they're vulnerable, but they're strong, but they care about me, and I'm interested in their stories. And so for me, that doing men's work after that, it blew my mind wide open to what a guy should look like. I think between you and that, I now had a blueprint. And I think so few, young men growing up, you don't know what a man looks like. So that's why they get seduced by this sort of toxic masculinity nonsense and all that. Is they don't see like an empathetic, guy in his kind of wholeness, fullness, king, archetype, whatever you want to call it. So I found that really helpful. And yeah, the inner structure bit, just touched on it there, the archetype, that was massive. So Rod Boothroyd's podcast with you, I started reading Warrior, Magician, King, Lover, and that gave me like a structure, working with you in my head, so that I could meditate, go inside, talk to the magician, fear, warrior, anger, lover, grief, and then king, joy. I could, like a bit like in that beautiful film Inside Out, I could talk to the parts. I had a language with them. Okay, who's upset today? Right, let's have a hug. And the inner critic started to go. And it's like I suppose in a champion, in a cheerleader, whatever you want to call it, started to come through. So yeah, I think it's been 3 years of that sort of stuff, just going further and further down the rabbit hole. I'm just looking up emotional freedom technique that you taught me first, and then I went on to study with Carl Dawson, and I'm now an advanced practitioner. That journey, just the simple thing of tapping, breathing, processing these things that had happened to me, in a space where I couldn't go into fight or flight and shut down or freeze, and where in matrix re-imprinting, sort of an add-on to emotional freedom technique, you can just find those beliefs, those self-limiting beliefs, rework them through these old memories, come to something you can live with, like a new belief you can live with. It's just, the stuff is just gone. Like the trauma bit, the body somatic trauma, like body keeps the score, Bessel van der Kolk, it's all in here. It started to drop away. So yeah, that was really powerful.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your path to healing. It's, it's so inspiring to hear the journey you've been on from where you came and what you went through. So thank you. So I guess where I'd love for us to segue and then is, you wearing the t-shirt seen and heard. So I'd love for you to share a little bit how, I see, you know, reading a lot of psychology books at the moment about happiness and the importance of purpose, having that purpose. Well, why am I here? Whether it is just to serve, to help others. Sounds like you've really found that through doing your seen and heard work.
Yeah, thanks, Piers. Yeah, before seeing the head, I started retraining as a coach,
Mm.
and so this is a couple of years ago, and went through a counselling course, mental health first aid, um, emotional freedom technique, matrix reimprinting. So I did all my sort of training around that, and basically, I wanted to do what you did. I was like, this guy saved my life. I want to go and help someone. I have to pay it forward. I have to reach out and help someone now. And in doing that training and continuing to do the work, I started to open my eyes about, if I hadn't found you that day on Google, I'd got to the point where it was only my kids keeping me alive. And my only purpose in life was don't die before they're 18. That was it. That was the extent of my, you know, mission, vision, whatever. And yeah, so with all the training, I'd started to realize that if I hadn't found you that day, I wouldn't, I might not be here. I don't know. So how can other people who may have come through like the similar experiences as me growing up, boarding school, independence, day school, difficult, childhood experiences stuff. If if it was the universe that gave me you, if you like, how can I actually use all my 20 years of sort of corporate marketing experience, all that sort of stuff, and pull together some of the strands of this amazing work that was being done, like you, Nick Duffel, Joy Shavarian, Alex Renton, Simon Partridge, all these people who are doing wonderful advocacy work, helping Thurston Bassett, trying to bring these parts together from the sort of boarding school trauma world or experience world. They were all doing magnificent work, but it was a bit disparate. And what I thought was with Seen and Heard was if I could build a website and a platform where we could bring all these things together in one place, signposting, and to deliver some services to people to support them on their journey as well. I thought I could be of service in that way, use what I knew to create that. And myself, Andrew, and Toby, the directors, but it all came from a boarding school survivors Facebook group. We wanted originally to create an app to help the kids that were still in the schools with emotional health and well-being, and to feel supported. But working with under 18s in an institutional environment with this technology, it was like beyond our skill set. So we've just, instead of going, oh well, that's it, then we've done what was within our gift. So the website's there, offer like free online connection groups, sharing circles for ex-boarders and independent day pupils and their families. Those are brilliant. Now running 3 or 4 a week. People come along, share. We've got a specialist therapist counselling and coaching directory. People on there have all been either through the boarding school system themselves or have done specialist training. So it's, we started to actually deliver services now. It's only been going maybe 9 months, 6 to 9 months. So, that's the bulk of it, but we're now turning our attention at Seen Her to outreach. So this all starts this month. It's like a new term. I'm feeling that new term feeling of like, got to get some stuff done. But university counselling services, so my wound, if you like. So raising awareness for our stakeholder group in uni counselling services. Just ask these kids where they come from, where they went to school, and know a little bit more about, okay, if they went to these kind of institutions, they may be carrying a lot of this kind of stuff. The second one there is with the mental health accrediting. groups like BACP, UKCP, COSCA, so the ones that sort of manage all the therapists and stuff, just getting it high profile with them, getting it boarding school syndrome and things like that as a searchable term on their directories, and getting, you know, articles, blogs and things out there, just keep raising awareness, keep the noise up. And then the third big one, which is exciting and scary, is going to the schools themselves. So trying to engage with the boarding school association, the schools themselves, with a different story, if you like, which is ultimately the way the world is going. Sending kids off to boarding school at 7 years old is not going to be sustainable as a model in the world as it's going. You know, I think it's just sort of the boarding house already being sort of propped up quite a lot by overseas kids, you know, China, Hong Kong, Russia, predominantly, and you won't find a psychologist or a developmental biologist or therapist who thinks sending kids away at young ages is a good idea. You just can't find one unless they've sort of been paid to say otherwise. So that model, I think, is just phasing out over time, to the point at which I know you and I align on this, is that really sixth form colleges, you know, sixth form boarding, particularly if, you know, really sporty, arts, drama, music, you want to go into the military, you want to prepare for university. I can see that, you know, I can see that in the world. The early years boarding stuff, I just don't think it's got a shelf life. And so these schools, if, you know, to thrive commercially, which is, let's face it, what they're all about, need to pivot and shape to being a place where, if they're going to say it's a first-class education, it needs to be to produce leaders who are emotionally aware, who have a heart, who have love, who can operate in a world where the climate needs, you know, an awful lot of help and input, and where people are demanding a better awareness of emotional health and well-being. So, you know, I think these schools have some really good people in them, and they have the means to take emotional education, pastoral care and well-being for the current kids seriously. And we want to support them to do that, to help the kids that are there. And we also want to challenge them and say, the track record is not good. You know, there may have been a legacy of abuse at these schools, which may have been covered up, which may have not been fully sort of faced into. And even if there wasn't those long legacies of abuse, there's going to be ex-pupils who didn't have a great time, who are falling apart in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, when their parents are dying and they can finally talk about boarding school, that they're falling apart and coming to seen and heard and telling us their stories. So we want to ask the schools to set up wellbeing funds to allow us to get support services to people who are struggling, because this myth that we're all loaded, I haven't met a rich ex-boarder yet. That may be the circles I move in, but most of us are either in caring professions, sort of psychology, education, counselling, none of which anyone will tell you pays very well. And so, you know, a lot of the people that come to see the head can't afford the cost of their care. And they're often without a fixed address. They probably sometimes don't have a job, or they've been made redundant, or they just can't get themselves together for an interview and stuff like that. So it's we want to be able to offer the support services and connections for those people, and just bring them together in community. So there's the support services, there's the outreach, as I talked about, to the alumni groups, to the schools, and then there's the campaigning side of things, which I know we've talked about a couple of times, but particularly on the independent inquiry into child sex abuse, the ICSA findings, which still have not been actioned. And there's so much there. Setting up a redress scheme in the UK, setting up a child protection agency or something similar as an umbrella, and you've got mandatory reporting. Of course, it's still not. It needs to be have a statutory duty to report abuse.
It's ridiculous. It's like, how much was it? 183 million was spent on ICSA, and that was really there was 16 to 18 recommendations, I believe, but one of them was mandatory reporting, and it's what, 2 years later, they still haven't actioned it, and doesn't seem like they're going to. I spoke to Alex Renton and Dino Nocivelli about 3-4 months ago, and the loophole still says it's up to the child, if they've been sexually abused, to go and speak up. But as we know, it's like only 1 in 10, 1 in 9 actually will speak up. So that's 90%. It's not being dealt with. I just feel, yeah, it's time for these things to come in. And I love the work. And the analogy I kind of had yesterday, thinking about the work you're doing, Chris, is like there's little pieces of patchwork doing their separate things. And I feel with your work, you brought all of these pieces together. So it's made this beautiful kind of quilt or beautiful piece of patchwork that everyone's working together. So rather than it just being one person, it's now hundreds, thousands. So I really bless you for bringing us all together, the therapists, and I think you're doing amazing work. So thank you.
Thank you, Piers. Yeah, that means a lot. I think that was the aim, was to try and just align a little bit, because they said that these are really, the survivor groups, the therapist groups that all work in this sort of boarding school advocacy world. They are the most well-meaning people you'll ever meet, and that's the only reason Seen and Heard's got anywhere. Is there's no money, we've got no people. There's 3 of us. I'm the only one who's sort of working on it full time, and it's been one conversation. So I came and talked to you. You gave me 5 names. I talked to those 5 people. They gave me another 5, and it's like grassroots stuff. But ultimately, yeah, we need to work together to enact some change and improvements for the current kids, the ex-pupils, and then on a wider scale via the kind of ICSA recommendations for the country as a whole, to heal, like to heal from this legacy of sweeping things under the carpet, of people being institutionally wounded a lot of the time. I think if we can own our past and create leaders of the future who are in touch with their emotions, with their hearts, I'm really optimistic, just as a society, as a world. But if we keep going, without that pivot, I can feel it coming, and that's why I'm doing this work now. A lot of people said, "Oh, we tried that 10 years ago." I said, "Yeah, but it's not now. Now it feels like there's a momentum. There's your film, there's Seen and Heard, there's all the great work that boarding school survivors support are doing, or boarding school action, or just speaking to loads of trauma-informed teachers and counselors and stuff now who are changing things in schools."
Yeah.
There's a real groundswell now, and it's just about going and actually engaging with the institutions. Seek to understand first before trying to be understood. Listen. What are you doing? What's changed? What are your troubles? Where are you getting things right and wrong? Then we've got a panel of experts, if you like, to give new thinking that you might not have tried. Just give this a go. Have you tried this? Have you thought about X? Let's look after these people to heal. Whether it's abuse survivors through a scheme, a redress scheme, in communicating with their institutions. There's some healing that can be done there, and then these people will go out and heal their worlds around them.
Mhm.
their families, their friends, everything will start to elevate. And but it all starts from this kind of understanding of early years trauma, owning our mistakes.
Mhm.
Something I, with my girls, my parenting journey, I had to sit down with them 3 years ago and just own all my crap and say, this is not you, this is daddy. This is daddy's stuff, and this is why. This is my life, and this is not an excuse. It doesn't excuse anything, but it explains everything.
Mhm.
So in owning, like doing truth and reconciliation with my girls, my own children, who at times I'd controlled and bullied and not listened to because I was so damaged myself. Through doing that process, it's like I now feel I can go and do that on a wider scale
Mhm.
in some way. So yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today and the work you're doing. And how do people find out more about your one-to-one work, but also your about seen and heard?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'd offer one-to-one coaching, organizational coaching, public speaking, things like that. And that's Growth Wave, my company Growth Wave. See a picture.
Beautiful, lovely picture.
Which is www.growthwave.uk. There's no code, just
Okay.
.uk. I'm sure you'll put that in the notes. Um, but the seen and heard side of things, www.seenheard, all one word, .org.uk. And if you email that, it'll come through to me. Likewise, if you email Growthwave, it will come through to me as well. So, but I'm always interested in, it's a very open-hearted sort of response from me, whether you're in favor of what I'm doing or you're not, because there's something to learn from everyone. Um, and as you taught me, there's where there's discomfort, there's growth. So some of the most challenging people in conversations, and there will be when we start talking to institutions and stuff, they're not going to like a lot of it. But I'll learn something from them as well. And at the end of the day, I believe people, I believe people are inherently good,
Mm-hmm.
and as particularly parents and institutions, they do want what's best. But because of their own trauma, because of their own upbringing, whatever, they're just stuck in rails,
Mm-hmm.
comfortable rails of comfortable misery that kind of hurt the kids in the institution or their lives, their families, or whatever. So it's just now just trying to get outside those rails and learn something new. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear from anyone. Really.
Bless you. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chris. Okay, take care. Bye bye.
Thanks very much, Piers. Bye.